gather round, folks, as I aim to tell you the story of how the greatest being who ever lived, the Primordial One, fell into the crosshairs of so many different groups, but more specifically, the 7 Sovereigns. Once upon a time, Teyvat lay untouched by man, but was a domain in which creatures of the Light Realm, also known as dragons, once inhabited. The strongest of these dragons were numbered as 7, one for each of the elements native to Teyvat, and they were known as the 7 Sovereigns. The dragons ruled Teyvat for an indeterminable amount of time, doing fuck all before the arrival of it. To call it mighty is to diminish the boundless expanse of its power. It is the architects of creation, the celestial artisan shaping the very fake sky with its omnipotent hands. It is the Primordial One, the creator of some, a progenitor god hailing from beyond the stars. Seeing this vast, lush land seemingly unused, Thanes decided to make it the abode of its soon-to-be most precious creations, humanity. But the Sovereigns, these lazy bastard Sovereigns, refused to back down and instead opted to fight for the land. It was then the Primordial One created the 4 shining shades of itself and swiftly defeated the dragons in 40 years flat, earning the rights to shape Teyvat in its image and for humanity. Thanes is truly a benevolent and caring god, a god for one, a god for all. I sure hope no one thinks their final destiny is to judge the usurper king in the heavens above.
My final destiny is to judge the usurper king in the heavens above.
Ugh. Anyway, that's more or less why the Sovereigns seem to dislike Thanes, because despite home court advantage and numbers, they blew a 7-5 lead and are still pissy about it thousands of years later. Following the end of the war, the Sovereigns that were not killed in battle fled to the Dark Sea, and some continue to exist even today. But that aside, there is still one great unanswered question regarding this entire conflict. What exactly was the Dragon King Nibelung's role in all this, and more specifically, was he the second who came, and has he been reincarnated yet? For those unaware, the Dragon King Nibelung, as you probably may have guessed by now, was the king of the Sovereigns, and presumably the strongest of them, and certainly the most defiant of them. What do I mean by this? Well, at some point during his conflict with the Heavenly Principles, Nibelung realized the Sovereigns were no match for the mighty Heavenly Principles, so as a last-ditch effort he left the worlds and came back with forbidden knowledge, hoping it would be enough to provide the Sovereigns the edge they needed to win the war. He was wrong, but it's worth pointing out Nibelung was the one who brought forbidden knowledge over to Teyvat for the first time. In the end though, it didn't matter, as the Dragon King would die during battle. However, the point of conflict regarding his actions are as follows. Did Nibelung bring forbidden knowledge over during his original conflicts, or did he rekindle the conflict with it becoming the second descender, also known as the second who came? While at first it may seem counterproductive to consider Nibelung as a candidate for the second who came, seeing as he's from Teyvat, here is what we know about both the second who came and the Dragon King Nibelung. The second who came on Teyvat, Jesus Christ, descended onto He descended onto Teyvat after the creation of humanity. Its arrival coincided with the rekindling of war, a brutal war that saw the heavens collapse and the earth rent asunder. Following this war, the Primordial One wound up winning and casted down the divine nails to purify the abyssal corruption that was ravaging the earth. Now, here's what we know about Nibelung, told exclusively through the eyes of a fellow sovereign.
We all once believed in the distant past that only forbidden knowledge could give us enough power to defeat the heavenly principles. The Dragon King acquired the power of darkness from outside of this world and led us in a fight against the order established by the outsiders.
Dragon King?
An unimaginable war took place in Teyvat, causing destruction on an unprecedented scale. The world itself was on the verge of collapse. In war, the victor would inherit the right to shape the world, while the losers must turn into ash.
A Pep's comments sorta clear things up? I don't know, you're moving a little sus, lady. But there are some key takeaways from this. 1. Nibelung acquired the power of darkness from beyond this world and led the Sovereigns in a fight against the established order of the Heavenly Principles. 2. The war she mentions that Nibelung led caused destruction on an unimaginable scale. And 3. The victors of war inherit the right to shape to vats, while the losers must turn to ash. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it?
The rules of war are woven in the womb. The victors shall burn bright, while the losers must turn to ash.
While there are some points of similarity between Nibelung's War and the Second Who Came, Apep's last statement seems to throw everything off. The victors of war inherit the right to shape to vats. It seems like that right was already won by the heavenly principles, unless of course she simply means that these rights are just always up for grabs and it just depends on who's willing to fight for it. In that case, yeah, sure, I guess. Also, she states that Nibelung led the fight against the order established by the heavenly principles. In the original war, the order had not yet been established until after their victory, so how could it be Nibelung did this if he didn't arrive after the order that had been established? And finally, to the point about destruction on an unimaginable scale, this and other similar terminology has only been used to describe the war between the Primordial One and the Second Who Came, but is now being used by Apep to describe the war between Nibelung and the Heavenly Principles. Finally, Neuvillette's story also offers some interesting words on this topic, calling the war between Thanes and the Second Who Came the Great War of Vengeance. Given the order established by the Heavenly Principles was so young at this point, who other than the Sovereigns could have had a grievance with them? The biggest question regarding this entire thing, of course, is how something from Teyvat can be a descender, given it was previously assumed that descenders are simply those that come from beyond the sky. Well, following 4.2, we got a more refined definition of a descender thanks to Renee, in which he writes, "For not all that comes from beyond may be one that descends. That title only belongs to wills that can rival an entire world." This expanded definition helps to explain why something like the all-devouring narwhal doesn't count as a descender, but at the same time doesn't help to explain why our sibling doesn't classify as a descender despite the fact that we know they come from beyond this world. I mean, either that or it's just like they got no will? You got no will? The point I'm trying to make here is that we don't quite yet have the biggest picture possible in terms of what can and cannot be a descender, because it doesn't really seem all black and white. So all in all, the theory can essentially be summarized as such. The Sovereigns lose the original war to the Primordial One. Realizing forbidden knowledge is the only chance they have, Nibelung leaves Teyvat, acquires the power of darkness, and returns. By the time he returned, the human and heavenly realm had already been created, but it mattered little to him as he kick-started the war with the heavenly principles. Corrupted by the forbidden knowledge, Nibelung was not recognized as Nibelung anymore, but rather the Second Who Came, and led the Sovereigns in battle once more against the heavenly principles, which caused massive destruction unto Teyvat, ended in the same result of the previous war, but this time with the added bonus of Nibelung's death. Following the war, the Primordial One was severely hurt, but also consumed by fear, so it casted down the divine nails to heal the worlds. I have some questions. 1. How could Nibelung be so unrecognizably corrupted by the power of darkness that he's mistook for a descender, while also being perfectly recognizable by the Sovereigns? I don't really get it. Like, who's coming up with these definition of descenders? Like, wouldn't there be information in Irminsul because of, or was it all wiped? I don't get it. I quite literally don't get that part of the theory, but hopefully someone can explain. Also, why is the Second Who Came constantly referred to as they and invaders when Nibelung is a single entity, and Apep made no mention of anyone else being with him? And for those arguing that the other Sovereigns could be referenced, the text reads this. Quote, "But in time invaders descended from beyond the firmament, bringing with them destruction, overturning rivers, and spreading plagues." This implies multiple people descended onto Teyvat, but we know from Apep, Nibelung was the only sovereign who left Teyvat. Finally, I suppose this then helps to explain Nibelung's potential reincarnation. If Nibelung did reincarnate, odds are it was this crystal. I believe this due to the fact that the Primordial One was scared people had the knowledge to break through the illusion it had created, but they only gained this knowledge somehow due to the arrival of the Second Who Came. So if the Second Who Came was Nibelung, then it could be his reincarnation was closely monitored, for if he ever regained his full dragonhood and his memories, he could give people the knowledge they need to break free from the chains put on them by the heavenly principles. The reason he calls himself a sinner could be due to the fact that he tried to take down the established order set up by the heavenly principles, just like Apep said. He's a dangerous fella, which is why they had to chain him up, and well, I don't know what else they did to him, but just chain him up. But well, I suppose we'll see, man. I'm not totally convinced by this theory, but there isn't a better theory. What's the old saying? It's harder to destroy a theory than come up with a new one. I don't know, some shit like that. I'm not a fucking beekeeper, bro.